We're going to stay on the second point of the 5 questions. Who are you currently discipling, and what specifically did you do this week to equip them in the Big Ten? This is a huge point. We focus on multiplication, not addition. And so a disciple, when he's invited into the discipleship relationship, he understands that within the month, he's going to begin either back door or front door meeting with somebody. If it's back door, that means it's a homework assignment that he's going to practice on somebody who's going to approach in his circle to do one of the homework assignments regarding the Big Ten. He will begin discipling immediately, whether it's his disciple or just an unbeliever or a seeker or another Jesus guy who's not being discipled. Regardless, it's somebody not in our discipleship family that he's going to practice on to break fear and to make sure that he practices whatever he learned the previous week, whether it's front door and back door. Dr. Coleman says, again, if you're not discipling, we have nothing to speak about. Meaning, since we're talking about generations, we're talking about our extended spiritual family line. And since that's the minimum goal, when we get together, I don't want to talk. He is saying, I don't want us to discuss how we're doing in our walk and what's going on in our personal life. There's a place for that, but the target we're talking about is what are the tools in our toolbox that we're giving away, how that process of giving them away is going, because we want them always to be thinking about investing, and advancing. And so when he says, if we're not talking about our children, what are we going to talk about? It's because the class, so to speak, or the relationship is really spiritual parenting. Those who will spiritually parent. And so 2 people that are single wouldn't come together and talk about their extended family because they don't even have children yet. So we want to have children right away and have children who are going to have children right away. And so that allows us to have conversations about the generations. How did your parenting go this week? If people are parenting, they don't even have an answer for that question. Parenting in this case is back door, front door, reaching out to people for the sake of leading them into the Great Commission lifestyle and practicing the habits and disciplines of a vertical walk with God or a horizontal Great Commission lifestyle. This is where we're headed. The third question is, who are you considering as future discipleship prospects, and what did you do this week to interact with them? We're always trying to move people through prayer and action through the process, the filter, that they come into our family. We want them to come in the family. Even at the same time, we want to make it clear that we're very slow in inviting them in. That sounds funny, sounds like an oxymoron, but really both are happening. We're praying that they aggressively join our family, even as we're slow to make decisions about asking them to join in a committed way, because we know selection is an important process, maybe the most important in the process of discipleship and disciple making. We want to get the guys, the disciples, gals, we want to get them thinking about discipleship candidates always and ongoing. Because like we said in that insurance example, if you don't have people in the funnel, when you're in a position where you want to add, there's no one to add. Now you have to start from scratch and start praying about somebody to come, and that process isn't quick. Sometimes it drags on. Now, frankly, once you're a parent and you're discipling others who are discipling others, you're always going to run into people in God's goodness. I like that line from, I think it's The Natural. It's not The Natural, it's from Field of Dreams. If you build it, they'll come. So if you're praying for a family, and if you build a family, God will bring people to your family. You'll invite some. The Holy Spirit will push others there. Your own disciples will invite people. The family will grow. I've not seen it. Now, again, this is not working in a third world country or in a place, let's say, where Islam is thriving. So there's very few even disciples out there, followers, let alone disciples, let alone lots of prospects, right? But they're unsaved prospects. That's a little bit of a dicier deal. But in the first world, for sure, at least in America, I have people that I can always give. If my quiver is full, that's a Bible example. If my quiver is full of arrows, and if one of my guys doesn't have somebody, I can give somebody who's in my quiver. So they have somebody to work with. as appropriate to their maturity. If they got one eye and I have somebody I've recently come across who is a brand new believer, I can give them to one of my disciples. My point is, the disciples can't learn how to parent unless they're parenting. And if they have no one in their circles that's immediately jumped in their boat, then we're going to pray for that as we give him some that we have already or someone in the group does. I got guys that are already discipling that have a number of people, and if Johnny has no one and Bobby has 4 or 3 or 7, let's give one of them to Bobby so he can work on somebody. Share the treasure is the point. It's just a principle of making sure people have people to work with. What I do want is I want to know what they're doing with a prospect to keep that relationship ongoing. So there's a quantity of rub over a quantity of time with a prospect where you're always fishing about seeing if they're willing to come into the family through you, that you would be somebody that would disciple them. This would be the intent. If they're sitting in this place, I want to make sure they have opportunities to move to the next spot. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to ask every week somebody who's a prospect. That means you're praying about them and you're interacting with them, engaging with them. And as the Holy Spirit leads, you're continuing to roll out the ball out there and say, hey, love you to get together. Love to get together with you regularly. Love you to come visit our discipleship group. Love you to come to our men's group. However you word it, don't get weird about it. But let them know that we want them with us, and we want them to be with us in a committed way. The fourth question is, we move now from discipleship, disciple making, to mentoring. Those that have something that we want. It doesn't have to be in an area of spiritual growth. It could be, I'd like to fish, and that guy's a good fisherman. It'd be like, I like to know how to work on a car, and that guy's a mechanic. It might be, I don't know what. It's anything that you want to get better in, whether the immediate goal is spiritual or whether it's natural. It could be something that you pursue just because you know it's going to enter you into a world where there's a fishing pond where there's good fish. So though I don't care about sports, I might choose to become a Mariner fan because in my circles, everybody loves the Mariners. So wisdom for me is to love the things they love in order to build a relationship with them that might turn into the kingdom. That's far-ranging thinking in the Great Commission lifestyle. When you'll choose to be something or do something that is not your natural affinity for the sake of the kingdom. It's wisdom. It's incredibly wise. It's Hudson Taylor going to China and shaving his head like a Chinese in that era in the 1800s and putting on Chinese garb. He wanted to be with them. He wanted to be one with them. He wanted them to feel like they were valued. And so he eliminated barriers. He was willing to be, as Paul said, all things to all men, so in all possible ways to save some. If I got to be a Mariner fan, I'll become a Mariner fan. If I got to stop eating meat, I'll stop eating meat if I hang out with vegetarians. If I got to become a sports fan and I don't like sports naturally, then I'm going to be a sports fan. That guy's going to advance the kingdom because he's willing to do anything as the Lord directs to move the ball forward for salvation for the lost and the discipleship of the saved. The fourth question then again is, who are your current mentors and what specifically did you learn in your interaction with them? The presumption is they had an interaction. Now, practically speaking, a mentor does not have to be local, though that's ideal. He might be somebody who is at a distance, but at some point there has to be an interaction. When I talk about mentors, as you know I've said before, most of my mentors are dead. They were dead before I was born. So in that sense, I was talking about books. And a book can mentor you. Somebody dead can mentor us. When I'm talking about mentoring in the 5 questions, I'm actually talking about people who are alive. And I'm not talking about listening to podcasts. You can be mentored by podcasts. I'm talking about interpersonal relationships they have with an actual human. Whether they're local, that's ideal, or from a distance, it's a Skype, it's a FaceTime, it's a Polo, it's a phone call, it's an email. I want an interaction, a rub that translates into you learning something specifically. What I don't want with the 5 questions is for them to say, I met or I interacted with my mentor and we had a good time. I want to know, what specifically did you learn? Now, a lot of times that means you have to be prepared to ask questions. Because if you go there and just sit down, that mentor may not have a vision of moving the ball forward for you. You have to coach him up on what you're looking for. Can we get some time? I had this happen today now that I'm thinking about it. I'm meeting with a guy that had struggled with PTSD stuff. He's a policeman. He's gone to counseling about how to disable things that cause panic and anxiety. I have battled panic and anxiety, and I want him to mentor me. So I've been out to coffee with him 4 times asking about non-spiritual techniques that counselors are using in order to disable physiological, emotional, and mental stress. It's not a Bible verse, but it's not biblical, but it's certainly not unbiblical, and God can use teachers and doctors and others to heal, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. And so for me, I'm seeking out a peer who's actually one of my disciples to mentor me in an area that he has one eye in and I have 0 eyes in. I'm practicing what I preach. I'm not doing it so the disciples see me that way. I'm doing that because I want it, because I need it. Whether you do it because you want it or need it, or whether you do it to be a model, do it. That's my point. I want to know, what did you specifically learn? So I could tell you today a technique I learned in breathing and a technique I learned in journaling that I'm going to practice because of my own life and what I need to do emotionally and mentally to be more and more healthy. This is me living out in my own life a seeking mentoring mentality. We're always looking for learners, people that want to learn and have a heart for learning. Dr. Coleman in his 80s said, "Scotty, there's so much to learn." That's a picture of the kingdom. The longer you walk with God, the more you realize you're small and he's big. The more you realize I know less than I thought and he knows more than I thought. The bigger he becomes, the less that you become. That's part of maturation. Maturation isn't the funnel's getting narrower. I'm starting to get it down now. The longer you walk, the more you realize you don't have your ducks in a row. You don't know what you're doing. You need help much more than that. It's a sense of greater depravity and greater dependency than less. That's the upside down kingdom, and we're trying to foster that by having them ask and think about meeting with people that can move the ball forward in their life, spiritually, and also in civil society. I want to be a better citizen. When I vote, since I'm not abreast of the political scene, I seek guys who mentor me in politics to tell me what the issues are, who the guys are running for office and gals, and who they'd recommend, given my mindset and worldview, that I consider. This is another example of seeking help, of asking questions of folks who have more expertise than you do. You have to have humility to do that, because you're basically saying, I don't know what to do, will you help me? That's the kind of culture we're trying to create, spiritually and otherwise. The 5th question is, who are you considering as potential mentors, and what specifically are you hoping to learn from them? That's me getting my guys to ask God about who's out there that can teach me something about an area that I want to learn in. I'm, again, trying to get them to think about future mentors, because if they only think about the people that they're currently mentoring them and they're not thinking about further growth, at some point they're going to stall. What I can't afford is for myself to go flat, myself to stall, myself to be satisfied. I have to work at being a lifelong learner. I got to model it. They got to watch me model it. I got to watch them model it for their disciples' sake, and then they're going to model it. That's where we're always thinking in this reproductive cycle. So those are the 5 questions, and those are my responses to them. Here's some coaching points about mentors. We all stand on the shoulders of others. The question is, whose shoulders are you standing on? Some are dead, some are alive. If we want to be macro about it, we stand on the shoulders of the disciples, of the patriarchs, of those who've gone before us from as far back as the world has existed up to from Adam on, and we have people that are more local in our generation. But we want people to realize that you are who you are because somebody lived a certain way, prayed about you, whatever. We want them to realize that this is a process. Most of my initial mentors were dead. I've said that before, through books, nowadays through people through the internet. However, the best mentors are those that you can live with and interact with in person. In person is better than through technology. Both work. Just do it. That's the bottom line. Encourage your disciples to ask questions. Encourage them to think about, what do I want to be great in? What do I want to get skilled in? What can be effective to move the kingdom or make me a better husband, father, worker, and friend? What's going to assist society? I want them thinking about these things. There's value in that. Mentors can be resourced for both spiritual and other vocational or civil reasons. Additionally, mentors can be resourced for general or specific reasons, general life issues, or an actual current situation in your life, as I alluded to with my desires to become more mentally and emotionally healthy. Your attitude regarding mentors should be, I want to climb on their backs, or I want to grab hold of their arm, and I want to learn from them, and I want to know what they know about things I know less about or know nothing about. There's this desire for hunger that has to do with the will, which is why I pray, Lord, make me want to more, make me more hungry, and make my disciples want to know you more, make you know more, make you known more, in Jesus' name. I want them to turn these people, these mentors, upside down and shake them and find out what falls out. I want them to think about specific questions to ask them. You can't have too many great mentors any more than you can have too many great uncles and aunts. I had a lot on each side. My dad had 4 in the family. My mom had 9. My grandmother had 17, I think, on both sides. My grandfather, there's a lot of great uncles and aunts, and when I say great, I mean terminology, and uncles and aunts that I literally had. You may have a lot or a little, humanly speaking, in your bloodline, but you can have innumerable in your spiritual line, and the more the merrier, because you can't have too many great folks who are willing to be available for you or invest in you.